My name is Earl Ijames. I'm one of the curators at your North Carolina Museum of History. I'm also a farmer, and I'm a seventh-generation North Carolinian. And I was honored when Angela asked me to read aloud part of an article and a historian and a historical exhibit that I had the opportunity to do in this very building, honoring the first African-American political pioneers. And so I'm going to share part of an article that I wrote in support of an exhibit that I have to unabashedly plug for our museum called A Promise Disrupted, Freedom, North Carolina, 1862 to 1901. And I'm going to share with you today the first political pioneers who used their hands and their skill in this building to craft laws to change the customs that have been in place for more than 200 years when our 13th Amendment was ratified here. In 1857, 27-year-old Abraham Galloway hired himself out as a brick mason. To escape this form of slavery, he hid in a turpentine barrel and left Wilmington seeking freedom in Philadelphia. Galloway would become an important African-American leader and a hero of the Civil War. He reportedly visited the White House and was asked by President Lincoln to become a Union spy. After the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, he recruited enslaved and free men of color into what was called the African Brigade, later becoming the United States Colored Troops. Galloway is just one of 13 self-identified Americans who served as delegates in the Tar Heels' important 1868 North Carolina Constitutional Convention that took place in these chambers 151 years ago to this day. This group included American Indians, African Americans, and Americans of mixed race who were not enslaved. Many North Carolina politicians at that time favored universal suffrage. But before slavery, most of the state's enslaved population and most free people of color lived in the counties east of Raleigh. These, quote, colored people, as they were called, tended to vote for the Democrats back then. They were the only party on the ballot usually. In the Piedmont and the Western counties, they tended to vote for the old Whig Party. The old Whig Party pushed for better schools, internal improvements like better roads and canals, but they wanted more political power for the state's west, so they supported disenfranchising free people of color in 1835 as this building was being erected. So by 1860, more than 1 million people, enslaved and free, lived in North Carolina. 1/3 of those people were enslaved men, women, and children. So when the Civil War ended, Congress ordered this state to draw a new constitution, which I can say we have the opportunity to have on exhibit at our Freedom exhibit across the street. The General Assembly here decided to hold a referendum in November 1867 to choose delegates to a constitutional convention to be held here, as I mentioned, in January and February of 1868. The former Confederates had not been pardoned and were therefore not eligible to serve. So chosen of that first lot of delegates were 107 Republicans and 13 Democrats. 13 black Republicans represented 19 majority black counties. The members of this first black caucus were not legislators exactly, but they came together at the state capitol to take part in an important process, helping to open one of the state's spirited and most contentious eras called the Reconstruction era. Despite opposition, the 1868 delegates passed resolutions prohibiting slavery, acknowledging that we were not 3/5 but whole human beings in the 14th Amendment. And one of the things I like to point out is that these men favored a uniform public school system for everyone between the ages of 6 and 21, which is a tenet of our Constitution that surpasses the federal mandate on the United States Constitution to this day. These men helped to lay the groundwork for all Tar Heel citizens' liberties and prosperity. Their service inspired many others, especially formerly enslaved people, to seek a better life. Between 1868 and 1901, I had the privilege here to list on these door chambers 124 men who served in this chamber, 97 State House Assemblymen, 27 senators, ending with the banker Isaac Smith of New Bern in 1901, Buffalo soldier Colonel James Hunter Young from Raleigh here, and the last black congressman from the South, George Henry White, who we have the opportunity to have the first known artifact on exhibit of his across the street today. In ending, I'd like to share these men who were the groundbreakers, these pioneers, starting with Bishop James Walker Hood. Bishop Hood was the president of the first Freedmen's Convention in the South and the leader of the delegation of black Republicans here, as well as instrumental in the founding of two of our state's historically black colleges, Livingstone College and Fayetteville State University. Staff Sergeant Parker David Robbins, a free man of color, part Chowanoke, part black, and part white, out of the Winton Triangle and Bertie County area. Staff Sergeant Robbins' 2nd United States Colored Cavalry was the 2nd Regiment to capture Richmond as Confederate President Jefferson Davis and Confederate General Robert E. Lee evacuated Richmond in April of 1865. Bryant Lee, the regular farmer from Craven County. Wilson Carey, the teacher from Caswell County, who said, "The Negro planted the wilderness, built up the state to what it was, and therefore if anything was to be given after this constitutional convention, the Negro was entitled to it." Clinton Pearson, who was a farmer. Henry C. Cherry, an architect and builder, and if you visit historic Tarboro, the builder of many of those fine homes there. John Hendrick Williamson out of Franklin County, who was the founder and editor of not one but 2 newspapers, the Raleigh Banner and the North Carolina Gazette. Cuffy Mayo, a teacher from Granville County and a free man of color, or free issue as he would have been called, because neither of his parents were ever enslaved. Henry Epps, a brick mason from Halifax County. W.T.G. Hayes, a teacher, also from Halifax County. John Adams Hyman from Warren County, who was also one of our state's 4 black Republican congressmen. The famous Abraham Galloway, known as a radical, who said that he wanted owners of large estates taxed at $1 per acre in order that the land might be sold by sheriffs and the opportunity given to the Negroes to finally buy land. And ending in Mr. James Henry Harris, a teacher, a free man of color whose grandfather was a Revolutionary War patriot out of Granville County and owned his own upholstery store on this very street in Fayetteville Street before the Civil War. When this very body gerrymandered him out of the legislature in 1880, he retired and started a newspaper called the North Carolina Republican, whose slogan was firm in the right. Thank you.